And the next full task force meeting is coming up on Wednesday, January 19th. So we have a lot of activity this month in particular. We are all working towards the final report that will be due 12 months after the first meeting, which was on November 17th. And that will, I'm sorry, which was in November of 2021. So this final report will be presented on November 17th, 2022. What will be accomplished for that report will be there has to be an action plan, and it will address the 9 categories that have been established by the task force. After that November 2022 meeting, this task force will meet annually, and they will meet annually to track the progress on the action plan that's being worked on and established now. And they'll also discuss budgeting items for action plan priorities. Currently, we are here in the schedule of our annual task force convening. And like I said, we do have quite a few activities for this month. We'll have a governance meeting and a full task force this month as well. So the goals for today's meeting is to discuss what we are calling the benefit effort matrix and action plan. This action plan exercise will basically look at every category, identify a rough level of impact, effort, and time. And then we will also include additional projects not currently identified. And hopefully that will come out of the conversation from each of the task force members as we work through the items that we will discuss today. We also hope to prepare to report action team progress at the January full task force meeting. So whatever we discuss today will be summarized and reported out at that full task force meeting. Next slide, please. So again, we have 2 action teams and 9 categories. The first categories 1 through 4 is handled by or spoken to by the residential resilience action team. And then we have a governance and coordination action team that handles items 5 through 9. Thank you. Next slide, please. So for today's discussion, we are going to hear a lot from Salil Kakar, who is with DC Water, and he will lead the next 60 to 70 minutes of conversation. Thank you, Salil.
Thank you, Monty. And good afternoon and a happy new year. And hopefully I'll do more leading and less talking and let the team do a lot of the talking as we move forward this afternoon. Next slide, please. So I want to start with this slide because we always start with the end in mind. We've got a lot of ideas and there's more being developed as we move along. And we need to have a way to categorize the ideas so that we know what's the effort, what is the benefit of these ideas. So there's typically a value effort matrix that's shown up here. And there's 4 quadrants. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And pardon the redundancy if I go through it. And we'll be happy to send you copies of this, Hilario. It's the bottom left is what we call a quick win. Quick win. Those are easy to implement, may have a low value, but they do have a value, but they're very quick to implement. This is something we can do right away, and we should proceed with it. This is a short timeline, fast acting ideas that we can implement. Going up to top left, these are ideas that have a very high benefit and need some level of commitment from the team, but it's manageable commitment. But the benefit is tremendously high. And the fact that the effort required is low means they can be implemented quickly. Top right, what we call the big bets, those are large projects with tremendous return, very high benefit. Also, probably involve a lot of agencies and a combined effort. Doesn't mean we don't do it. It just means it gets done on a different timeline. And the bottom right, the spinning wheels, these are projects that take a lot of effort, but in the end, when you step back and look at it, the benefit it derives is not in proportion to the amount of effort required. And those need to be looked at seriously. It's not that you don't do it, but since we all have to prioritize our time and any available funds, you have to say where do you want to apply that time and funds. So these are the four groupings we want to put projects into. Not just the ones we talk about today, but as we go along, anything new that comes along, we need to have a method of coming together and saying, all right, which box does it belong in? And the next couple of slides, next, we're going to explain how do we put them in one of these boxes. Thank you very much. So from the value effort, the effort perspective, let's start from there. Effort to execute the work. We took a quick look at this, and we'd love to get your input in on here. Let's say in the effort, if it's a single agency effort that can implement it, for example, if it's a backwater valve, I'm just using an example, it would go into the low category because it's a single agency. If it requires more than one agency to work on it, it's two agencies, it's a medium level of effort. And if something requires coalition building, because there's multiple agencies, NGOs, other entities that need to be part of the discussion, that's fine. But we just put it in the high effort requirement. Same thing goes with time to complete. If it can be done within a year, it's 1 to 5 year window, medium, and projects that go beyond 5 years are under high. Cost range, same thing, at $1 million, $1 million, 10, or at over 10 million. And the reason we want to go through this is as we go through the projects, we use the straw man in terms of assigning these values, low, medium, or high, and we'd like the team to look at it and agree or recommend an alternate. On the benefit side, if it's citywide, it's a large benefit. If you completely remove a flood risk, it's a tremendous benefit. Medium, it's 100 to 500 year floodplain area, or if you substantially reduce the flood risk. And low would be if it's an individual home or a very specific area and a small reduction in flood risk. They're all good. None of this is bad. It just means how do we categorize the projects so that we know where to put our energies. Next slide. I will go into these in detail just to give you an idea on what the matrix would look like. It's color coded so that visually you can quickly tell where something falls. So this is category 1, flood and sewer line backup insurance. And Philip, we just took a quick crack at this. We'd love for you to jump in here and guide us through it in some of the discussion items later on. But for example, let's take action 1.2.1, negotiated fixed scope of drying cleanup services. Is the effort easy, time easy? It's going to cost money. And what's the benefit? Benefits a lot of people. Okay, so just going through, and the ask for today is for us as a team to go through these 4 categories, lists of projects, and say yay, nay, or propose an alternate for effort, time, cost, and benefit. I'm going to stop here, and before we actually go into the projects, ask if there's any questions.
Just a thought, if I may.
Yes, please.
If you go back to the flood of September 2020,
Yes, sir.
is there enough data on how people were actually impacted to take this list of action ideas and overlay it on the actual experience and see, how it might have been different if one of these actions were in place, or how many people would have benefited from, one action versus another looking back? Is that possible?
It's certainly possible to do that. We have a lot of data from the September 2020. We have the calls that came in. We have the insurance claims that came in. We have the backwater valve request that came in. So yeah,
I don't know, maybe others wouldn't see any benefit in it. I just wonder what we could learn by doing that, by overlaying this on the actual experience in the flood and seeing how it might have made a difference. Just a thought.
no, I love the thought, and here's why I like it. Anything that we do, we need to be able to measure its effectiveness. And an exercise like the one you proposed, it may not be perfect, but it's still a method of measuring. Because in the end, these are proposed actions, there's proposed benefits. And once these are done, we want to ensure that there is a tangible validation of what we had assumed. So it's a great idea. Thank you. Any other questions or suggestions?
So Leo, this is Nick. I just thought I'd reiterate. I think I heard you say this, but just so everyone knows, we've filled this out between DC Water and DOE, filled out the colors because we thought it would be easier to start with something rather than a blank slate. But it is by no means, our final version. We really hope you guys tell us, no, I don't think that's the right color for this one, and here's why. That we're, I wouldn't think of filling out these colors as the end goal today. We're really hoping this will start the conversation so we can get a little bit deeper into these ideas. So just throw that out there, that please don't feel like this is a finished product. We do not think of it as a finished product. It's just kind of the beginning of a conversation.
Thank you, Nick. This is what you would call a straw man option, only because I don't know what the gender neutral version of straw man is, but pardon me if it's not politically correct. But it's just something for everybody to look at and throw dots at. Or suggestions, helpful suggestions, sorry. Next slide, please. Okay. Philip, would you like to, let's go on to the next slide.
So Salil, we're going to bring up the actual spreadsheet now and get into that section of the spreadsheet.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Adria, is it possible to make this larger?
Yes.
A little too large. Right, let's go to Philip Barlow. Would you like to lead us through this, or would you like me to co-lead it with you? I think you're on the line.
So Leo, I'm from DISB as well. Can you co-lead it with me? So the first thing that pops out is, the first thing that pops out is, I see in regards to a community insurance product and a parametric insurance product, there is a difference in the time component. So, a lot of this is guesswork, but what were we thinking? What were you guys thinking when you filled this out in terms of, the time for the community insurance product is less than the time for the parametric? Is that based on some historical data you were looking at?
Could someone briefly explain the difference again, quickly?
So do you
I
want
think
to-
that you can generally say that green is good, orange is bad, yellow is in the middle.
Right.
Yeah,
So if we take real quickly, so effort, roughly green is one agency can do it. Yellow is it's going to take a few agencies. Orange is it's going to take a lot of people, a lot of different stakeholders. Time, about a year. Green, yellow, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, and then no, I think it's 1 to 5, and then orange greater than 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe the question was also a little explanation of the community insurance product versus a parametric insurance product.
I can address that. That's based on no real information. No knowledge on what those actually are. So if they are exactly the same and they're both complex, then let's change them to be both complex. If they are, or taking a lot of time. If they are the same and can be done in 1 to 5 years, then let's change that to yellow.
Yeah, just to throw some thoughts out there. Yeah, I think they're complex for different reasons. I think a parametric insurance product, that would be a relatively new product that you would buy from a reinsurer. So because it's relatively new, you know, there's probably like some time associated with that. Whereas the community insurance product is, you know, either something that the district government would create itself, or yeah, let's leave it at that. And that could be, you know, if we're having to create legislation and a program, you know, that could take a lot of time too.
So I'll say anything, just, you know, anything, I mean, both, whether it's a community insurance product or a parametric insurance product, I mean, those don't exist now. I mean, in the district for this issue, I imagine it would take legislation to create a framework, at least for parametric insurance, maybe not for a community insurance product, but possibly for that as well. And, you know, and then between doing legislation, getting insurers on board with developing products, because we can't coerce them to develop products, even if we create a facility for them to sell such products. I mean, hopefully there would be a you know, they would find these ideas reasonable and potentially, you know, with an ability to make a profit on them. But I think anything that involves creating a new kind of insurance that doesn't exist now is a sort of a long-term kind of project and an involved project.
Okay.
So would you say, Philip, that is a spinning wheels type of, you know, proposition, or is it, we need to change the color to match what you know the level of effort looks like?
No, I think they are both, you know, I can't say now that I know that either one of them is a solution, but I certainly think they are worth investigating. So I don't think they're just a spinning wheels thing. I think they do. I think they have transformational value if we're able to successfully make them happen. So you know, I think there's a high benefit to them, and but it's a big effort. So, you know, I think we ought to pursue them, but recognizing that it's a big effort.
So Philip, if I could jump in and just give you, I'm looking at 1.2.1.1. So like from the September 10th, 2020 storm, one of the big issues that we were asked to do and our board agreed to was provide a certain amount of service to people who had flooded, right? The question comes in when you do this over time is, how do you create those boundaries as to when you provide the service, who pays for it, etc.? That's a very needed service, because the first 24 hours is where you really want to dry out a home. So if people know they have access to some funding to get that done, they can get their work started. So that's something that would fall under a parametric insurance product. But like you said, it's creating that coalition.
Is this one? Yeah.
Well, to be clear, a parametric insurance product, I mean, you know, typically insurance products cover identified losses. So first you would have to evaluate the loss, and then you know, pay to address the loss. Parametric insurance policies don't look at the loss; they look at a triggering event. And if a triggering threshold is met, then a fixed amount of money would be payable. And so, you know, I think, I mean, there are certainly one place where I know parametric insurance is successfully used now is crop insurance, where it pays off if there's not enough rain, for example. And that's easy to measure, and that's straightforward. You know, where it gets complicated is, you know, you have to have a really well-designed program so that since you're not looking at losses, you know, you want to make sure that you maximize the likelihood that when there are losses, you've hit the trigger, and when there are not losses, you've not hit the trigger. And so, or else you wind up with money and no losses, or losses and no money with a parametric insurance product. And so that's a very complicated thing to get right. Particularly in the smaller the area that you look at, the more difficult that is. That tends to work better when you're looking at a broader scope than for example, an individual home or business. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be worked out, but it can facilitate quicker payments, but only if it's set up right so that it's triggered, you know, you have a lineup between when it's triggered and when there are losses.
What would your recommendation be based on your expertise here on some of these color codings? I mean, for the community and the parametric insurance product, I just from looking at them, I think things are reasonably good. The one, except I would change the time in 1.1 to orange as well, because again, I think that's a significant effort. As far as resilience outcome, I guess maybe it would help me to. I mean, I think I think what resilience outcome is related to whether the category has the potential to reduce the risk of loss. I think that's kind of what that is a way to think about it. And, you know, you've got no greens over there for the insurance kind of things, but I think that misses the idea that one big benefit of insurance is that it rewards mitigation. So, you know, your insurance will be cheaper if you do things to reduce the likelihood of a loss. So, you know, so some of these things, I mean, that's a more nebulous kind of thing, but again, if you have a community insurance product
that looks at what the community has done to address resilience, and to the extent that, it's kind of like, to take the example, fire extinguishers in your home. You get a discount on your homeowner's insurance if you have fire extinguishers and a fire alarm or smoke alarm, that kind of stuff. So to the extent that insurance pushes through financial incentives, improvements that can reduce the risk of loss. They're not going to reduce the risk of flooding, but they would reduce the risk of loss from flooding, which I think is, so that's kind of where I guess I wonder about resilience, if that could be expanded to cover, losses rather than just flooding in general.
Yeah, I think those are good points, Philip. I would think, yeah, I mean, yellow at least. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, so yeah, insurance won't prevent your home from getting flooded. But let's say other action ideas like a levee, right? A levee will prevent your home from getting flooded up to a certain level. And then if the flood is higher than that, it still gets flooded. And then you're still going to need a small business to dry and clean up your service, or insurance to cover the loss that you didn't think you were going to have because of levee. So I think there's a good argument.
So if we go down to 1.3.4, I mean, some of this is mixed up. So maybe that talks about what can a homeowner do to decrease the loss.
Right.
You do get flooded. So that would then build into a subsidy or a product, either way.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And defining the benefit and value, has been a difficult thing as we've been preparing for this meeting, to try to figure out how do we define this value. And so I think it's definitely I mean, all of these things are important, and it's trying to look at this kind of gradation of what's going to give us more benefit. Try to use this as a way to give some clarity to maybe within these different insurance options, what's going to give the better outcome relative to the other insurance options. So that might be a better way to think of it for this grouping specifically.
Along that line, looking at the benefit value scale, it's all expressed in terms of reducing flood risk. And I'm just wondering if it should be reducing the risk of flood damage instead, because and I just want to make sure I understand, is there anything on this list, for instance, backup valves, that could actually reduce the risk of flooding versus the risk of flood damage?
On the list that we're looking at right now, this is the insurance category. There's other stuff as you go down.
No, but I'm talking about the benefit value column on the right. When you look at the actual explanation of the scale of benefit and resilience outcome, it's expressed in high, medium, and low as reduction in flood risk. And I'm asking if that was the intention, or if it would be more accurate to be reduction in the risk of flood damage. Are we talking about reducing the likelihood of flooding with a backup valve, for example, or just the extent of damage?
Yeah, thanks. That's the same kind of point I was trying to make. There's only so much, I mean, from an insurance point of view, there's only so much you can do. I mean, we're not having an insurance policy, you can't put the paper up and stop the flood, but the insurance can either directly or indirectly you know, cause things to be done to mitigate the risk of loss from a flood. And
I'm
you know,
not
I
even
think we
focused
ought
on
to recognize
insurance.
that.
I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
that benefit value resilience category. If you go back to September 2020, if many more backup valves had been in place, would there have been some homes that avoided flooding or just had less damage?
I think so. In that specific example, if every home had a backup valve,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't, the water wouldn't have come from their toilet, but depending on their, the elevation of the door and the elevation of the sidewalk, water could have come in that way. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's tricky to say. You're bringing up good questions.
So there were about 400 homes, 300 to 400 homes that would have not flooded had they been a backwater valve. But there were other homes that would have flooded regardless because it's overland flooding. But it's again something that can be mitigated with
So Lil, I wonder also if you might bring in the thought of maintenance of the backwater valves. I know that there was some, or even installation, that those types of things have an impact as well. I don't think we have to go into that, but I think what I'm trying to raise is that there are variables even when folks have what they need to be successful.
But Salil, if I just understood what you said that there would have been 300 to 400 homes in 2020 that would not have flooded if they had backwater valves. Is that what you said? Or would have had less flood damage?
definitely would not have flooded from the sewer.
Okay.
Some portion of those homes had a dual hit. It flooded from the sewers and also from the land.
Okay.
But one is just, I mean, they're both not pleasant, but one is water cleanup and the other one is sewage cleanup, which is all different level of disinfection requirement. But you do bring up an excellent point, and we need to look at this, and maybe the benefit value descriptors don't have to be the same for every one of these categories. What works for one category may not be the same that works for insurance. We may have to define it differently for insurance.
Well, it sounds like it's different for backwater valves than everything else, but that's just my first impression.
That's a good point. And we need to be cognizant of that and not try and use one definition all the way across. But it's still possible to grade it so that we can see if there is a benefit or not. And I think that's a little bit more work, but it's worth it for clarity.
So, Salil, I know that this is a really good contribution to the conversation, and I know it's something that we want to continue to discuss, but I just wanted to check in with you to see if you wanted to move forward so that we can get through the other categories, or we can continue on if you find this to be important for the overall discussion.
Well, I'd like Philip to take a look at the rest of the action items now or later, both the Philips, and see if you want to have a discussion now where we could have a follow-up call for any of those. And the same applies to the rest of the team. Because I think the first one's always going to take the longest.
Salil,
Yeah,
I apologize, but I just wanted to hop and say that I think that what you brought up originally about our experience paying for remediation and some cleaning would be very helpful to DISB and others to understand, how these products might be helpful and what we're expecting them to do. Maybe at another date, but definitely would be interesting and I think helpful to understand our next steps.
And one of the things that's very clear is more than the action team meetings, we need some working group meetings to keep working on this. So please go ahead and add your name in the chat if you'd like to join DISB and the rest of the team on this category, so we can move on to the next one.
And Salil, this is Jed Ross. I'm the director at the Office of Risk Management. So just wanted to quickly point out that the Office of Risk Management's the authorized party to buy insurance on behalf of the district. And so Philip was correct in that, for 1 and 2, there's going to be a lot of legislative obligations, but in general, for either one of those, there has to be appropriate authority to buy any types of insurance or to create some type of insurance program to then be administered for the community. So just wanted to make sure that Office of Risk Management, we are the one who buys insurance now for the city. And no other agencies are supposed to actually be able to buy insurance. Just making sure that's clear. And then as it related to 1.3.4, I think that that's actually got to be a pretty high level of effort if somebody's going to be going out and talking to different homeowners about purchasing and retrofitting situations, systems associated with their particular individual homes. And that actually, rather than being green, is going to be definitely a yellow category requiring a lot of work and effort. So just wanted to make sure I pointed those couple things out. We have definitely talked at the Office of Risk Management over a couple of years. We talked to people in different marketplaces about a community insurance program. We currently administer a captive insurance program for the district, very small, which would be tackling 1.1. As it relates to 1.2, if we were to buy a parametric policy, we would have to have some really tight guidelines around that. And we'd also have to have some really tight, whether it be regulations and or statutory obligations, defining how would those monies be dispersed. And then, of course, very specific authority about how that would happen, how people would apply and how it would be issued. Something that I know that DOEE deals with all the time. But how do you actually administer a program where you pay out proceeds? Generally, when the District of Columbia receives proceeds from an insurance policy, it goes to the general fund. So a special fund would have to be created, and there would have to be very strict rules about how those funds would be dispersed and the application processes and what have you around that. So just wanted to make sure that those are kind of known. The same would also, of course, be around a community insurance product in terms of whether we became the captive insurance agency or an insurance pool for the community, and they were able to have heavily subsidized insurance that they then bought into our program. We would have a captive pool, and we would then disperse funds when certain metrics were met, establishing that those policies would be paid out. So just wanted to kind of put out, those thoughts and make sure that we were a part of the conversation, and that it was kind of known that if insurance was being bought, generally it's either the mayor or the Office of Risk Management who buys insurance on behalf of the city. And I think it would also be kind of a conflict of interest if DSB were buying insurance clearly as the regulators. So just wanted to make sure that was pointed out, and appreciate everyone's effort and thoughts on all of this.
No, I do appreciate
So,
this is critical.
so we certainly would not be buying insurance. I think there, and I think all those are very valid points. If we, and I think in some instances, we probably would go the way of the district being the entity that purchases this insurance. But, parametric insurance and community insurance products could also be privately purchased by homeowners, or businesses or whatever. So in that case, then, and that's frankly, because, that's what we deal with is commercial insurance is not so much less on the government purchased insurance. So I think that we need to keep in mind that that's also a potential option for a way to have this insurance come into effect.
Great discussion. I do think it warrants continuation even after this meeting. So I'll set something up. If you'd like to be part of it, Jen, I'm going to hope that you would be. Just add your name to the chat, please. Monty, or Adria, you want to go on to the next one? Next category, if you're ready.
Switching now.
Thank you. I think we can do 2, 3, and 4 in one visual. Fantastic. Thank you. That's good. So category 2, repair to flood damage. Ramesia, are you on that one?
Yes, I am. Hi there, Salil. Hi, everyone. So from my initial review of the information on the screen and the project scoping metrics that you guys have laid out, based on some of the projects and programs that are existing in the district, they are one agency efforts, but I think that this particular category would require multiple agencies. That was something that came to mind. And another thing that came to mind that I was just wanting to get more clarity on was the scale of benefit that you guys have laid out. It looks as though, and correct me if I'm understanding this, and open up to the floor for, I'm just able to facilitate, but this is really geared towards the mapped area, the FEMA mapped area, the 100, 500 year floodplain. And so that's what I was gathering from the visual, but if I'm mistaken, please let me know. The reason I wonder that is because of flooding that was experienced. If we take the example from September 10th, and we take in the examples from a lot of the calls and concerns that residents were bringing forth, they were of the neighborhoods. I believe it was 4 to 6 neighborhoods. Of those, one neighborhood was in the designated floodplain.
Yeah, I think Meredith mentioned that trying to come up with these different scales was pretty hard, and we were kind of going back and forth between how to categorize the scale of benefit. I mean, it's a good point. Yeah, I think especially with the interior flooding, a lot of that's outside of the 100 and 500 year floodplains. So, but that's not to say that there aren't a lot of homes that would be affected. So, I'm taking notes on that.
Yeah, I would just say with this category, just the scope of when we say a program to fund and repair low-income homes after a flood, I think that was something I was initial question from our last meeting. Just understanding that as I look more a better understanding of September 10th, which I think is a great example to kind of overlay over what we're trying to propose. There were 6 neighborhoods, and of the 6 neighborhoods, one was LaDroit Park, which we are familiar with 2012, but then there was Deanwood, which I'm assuming they meant to mean Watts Branch area. That's where they had a lot of resources for residents. So those are things that are important to know. But of those were the only 2. The other 4 were areas that are new to our understanding, which is Michigan Park, Brooklyn, Ivy City, Trinidad area. So those are just things to keep in mind about the scope of the program. But there are resources currently, but there needs to be more.
Yeah, I want to add that looking at this more and hearing the discussion today, I think what we're missing here is in the resilience outcome, you know, we're trying to target, is it protecting, is it reducing that flood risk or to that resident and how much? But I think the Flood Task Force specifically calls out reducing risks for vulnerable residents and vulnerable areas. And so I think we need to acknowledge that as in our ratings here, or in our evaluation, so that that itself gets higher weight. You know, if we are in fact accomplishing that, we need to show, because that is a high value of this task force.
I just wanted to interrupt. There were a couple of things in the chat that had not been discussed. We had a note from Grace Soderberg that what will be the sources for the funding for these proposed products, and that goes back to the previous conversation. And I just wanted to acknowledge that one before we move too far along. So if someone wanted to answer that, and then there's a couple of comments by Mr. Ross that were brought up in the chat as well. I'll say them after the first question's answered.
Yeah, I think Jed actually kind of got it exactly right. And I think as a group, in this group right here, we can brainstorm what the possible funding sources might be. But ultimately we're looking to the task force to, you know, if it needs to come out of the city budget to, you know, be lending some support towards that action, or like go in with eyes wide open that like, yep, we think this is important. We know it has to come from the city budget. And then when we're making the city budget, you know, support that action being in there. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I think Jed had it right.
Nick, one more comment on that. I think it really will depend on what types of these different categories are we tackling. So if we're talking about a community insurance product, which doesn't exist in the marketplace at all, is not really being done by any governments, it's basically creating an insurance pool where the government will create some type of subsidized insurance policy where individuals can come, low and moderate income individuals for their homeowners can come to the district, you know, pay a heavily subsidized insurance premium to the district. We create a captive or some type of pool. It's backed by at least an initial large amount of funding in order to buy that policy in the open marketplace, or we just create our own policy, our own program, and then we go to the reinsurance marketplace to kind of tackle the upper layers of what we might not want to cover. And basically, we would get some seed funding from the overall annual budget of the District of Columbia, or we get some grants from some third parties for that seed funding, and maybe we're able to collect enough premiums, even if it's low, you know, they're subsidized, that we can continue on an annual basis so long as we don't have any major losses. And subject to major losses, then we're going to be looking back to the district to refund that program in the future. So it's just a matter of figuring that out. There's a lot of push and pull. So if we made that decision, if we made that recommendation, we wanted to go through that effort, both legislatively, through regulations, through process and applications, and establishing what our payout requirements would be if people buy into those policies, what's our outreach to get people to participate in that pool, that program, that community insurance program, you know, whether we're going to be funding it to the nth degree, meaning we don't necessarily need those subsidized dollars from premiums from those homeowners. We just are going to buy the policy. When the bad loss occurs, they apply and we pay for it if they were within certain boundary lines. You know, all of those decisions need to be made in order to establish whether we're talking about, you know, a couple $1 million of seed money to buy a policy in the marketplace, or whether we're doing our own captive and then we're buying reinsurance, or we're not doing any of that and we're going to fully fund it. You know, so all of those decisions need to be made. And then from there, we're going to be able to make recommendations about how we fund that, whether it's going to take $20 million, or whether it's going to be $3 million of seed money, and hopefully those premiums, even though subsidized over years, we can get them into a position where hopefully if we don't have a major loss, the program will self-fund. And even when we do have a loss in 3 or 4 years and lots of people looking for those policies to be paid upon, we'll still be able to then do a renewal of the program in the next year. Again, all of those things are kind of determining factors that have to be analyzed. Same for parametric. Are we buying a policy? And as Philip said, is this something that private residents are going to be doing and buying on their own, and the government's not doing it? Well, as it is, we can't get people to buy low and moderate income homeowners in the district aren't buying flood insurance in flood prone areas at high volumes, and why we're having these consistent problems. So the idea of then trying to convince them to do parametric purchases seems pretty far-fetched if they're not even buying regular flood insurance. So it's just all of those kind of decisions about the cost benefits and what we should be pursuing, what we shouldn't be pursuing, and then what would be the cost to have the best program, given the best program for a community insurance program, I can tell you, is let's fully fund it. Let's get $50 million. The district taxpayers are going to pay for that. We're going to go buy reinsurance. We're going to get people engaged. We're going to do these steps to try and educate them and mitigate things, but we'll have a district flood insurance program for the community in particular areas that when they have a loss, the district comes forward and just does it, and the taxpayers are paying for that. But is that reasonable? Is that appropriate? Is it the right thing for us to do? Is it worth our effort? Is it worth our energy? Is that the best value to the taxpayers as a whole? And all of those decisions and discussions kind of really need to take place, so then we can get to thinking about what funding makes sense. I know that it's a chicken and egg and a cart and horse conversation, but I think that is, really getting to what we're doing here is great in terms of analyzing cost benefit. And then in each of these categories, there will have to be specific funding conversations for the best cost benefit analysis about how that category should move forward, and then making the recommendation on funding as a result of that. Just my 2 cents. And sorry to go on so long, but just wanted to kind of highlight and kind of lay that out, I think, progressively for all of our planning prospectively.
One other question related to that, and I may be forgetting, but my recollection is that DDOE would be getting funding to complete analysis of which areas in the district are most likely to flood. Is that correct? So if that's the case, I'm just wondering how that figures into everything Mr. Ross has described about insurance.
Yeah, so you're right that we're getting close to being able to award a contract, which will help us map out the areas that are at risk of interior flooding, like what happened on September 10th.
So if is it an insurance program just for everybody wherever they are in the city, or would it matter if they fell into a zone that is more or less likely to flood?
I think it would. So it does matter in terms of setting the premium price, or the willingness of a reinsurer, right? Because if you're saying we just want insurance for all district residents, some of them don't really have flood risk, some of them do. That's a different premium than, hey, we want insurance for these people we know have flood risk. There's a certain likelihood that they'll be flooded. So this is getting beyond my capacity to understand insurance premiums, but there is a relationship that I think we can both, if we do it ourselves as a government, or if we are asking a reinsurer, I think giving them the data so that instead of guessing and over guessing the premium, they can have the best available data to set their rates.
And my-
Definitely that's accurate in terms of, you know, if somebody has a higher risk of it, the premium theoretically should be more. But as we're tackling, I think some of these decisions that the task force needs to decide upon is it best for us to tackle particular geographic areas? Is it best for us to say this is a wider program? So I think those are just policy conversations that will have to be made, and ultimate decisions and recommendations from the task force will be put forward. It's fantastic that DOEE is doing the analysis, because as we know, the 100 and 500 year planes that have been identified by FEMA don't really take care of a lot of the issues that we've been seeing as a city for, you know, whether it's rivarian, rain, you name it, whatever the particular circumstances that we've been encountering, aren't just the tidal basin flooding. And so getting those updated floodplains and updated flood information will help to inform a lot of that decision making.
Hey, as we get back to looking at these different categories and ratings, I just want to add it. You noticed on the on category 1 under insurance how we had added a lot of sub actions and detail, and on category 2 and 3 we don't have that level of detail. So I think this is a good time to be thinking about, are there more items that should be going into these other categories? Are there more actions we should be looking at? So just think about that, and as we you know, as we continue talking about this, and you go home and look at it, or go home, think over the next couple of weeks, you know, before our next meetings, of what we do with this. Think if there are other items we need to fill in here.
I have a recommendation on category 2. I know that people, once we give a program to fund repair to low-income homes after floods, there should be a support system around DCRA from a permitting perspective associated with that. So just because we fund it doesn't necessarily mean we're making it easy for those repairs to happen. So that might be, whether that in category 3 or category 2, just everywhere here, the DCRA, I see it in number 4, but I think it's probably important for us to have some type of permitting process to help support homeowners, low and moderate income homeowners, to be able to actually go through the permitting process to make those repairs.
That's a good suggestion. And for me, see, I don't know if, I mean, do you have any sense of how, all right, maybe DC Water too. I mean, you know, I know DC Water for the cleanup, you know, you just gave money, you just gave cash, and they were on their own to find the contractor. Is that right? No.
So we had two cleanup contractors on contract with fixed dollar amounts. And what we found out is in a lot of homes it was adequate, but some homes with a lot of furniture, rugs, etc. in the basement, that dollar amount did not completely finish the job. So part of this connection is, you know, it's all interconnected, all of these 4, is if we are going to provide, not we, but there's a bigger picture, the city is going to provide any money, there should also be some education on how do you mitigate or minimize damage in case you get flooded, so that the money that you get is going to be adequate. If you completely finish your basement and you have no protections and you get flooded, your damage is going to be significantly higher.
And I can just add to that. Hi, I'm Steve Dudek from the Office of People's Counsel, because we worked with DC Water after the September 10th flooding and got a lot of complaints, probably around 20 to 30. And there was different types of cases where people had $30,000 in damages after the restoration costs. And a lot of it came down to being informed, knowing what the services were provided, because DC Water, on their own goodwill, initiated that program to provide some help. They didn't have to do that. And I think the public got caught up on that everything would have been reimbursed for them. And so that was a lot of our conversations with those consumers, that the $5,000 was just for restoration. And so I think outreach is important. Education is important to, one, manage expectations, but to empower the consumer to say, hey, due to climate change, we know flooding in the district will continue to be a problem, and this is how we can help. These are the agencies that can assist you. And if you have any general questions, feel free to reach out to those agencies.
Yeah, these are super helpful. Salil and Nick and Meredith, I'm taking those notes and I can send back some of additional actions that people have shared and potentially some other suggestions. But I think like you said, these are connected. Understanding the insurance product that is potentially will be available will be helpful, but then also understanding what residents, the prioritization of the repairs and where that would happen, just understanding that from the group, that would be helpful. But I definitely will send back some of the suggestions and hopefully you guys can add more.
Thank you.
Maybe one. Sorry,
This is
go
Chris
ahead.
Bailey with DCRA. I just wanted to look at the 4.1.1 and just mention that the design community, the professionals, engineers, architects, builders, they really need to be tapped in terms of identifying their options. A lot of design professionals are working for a homeowner, and the homeowner is telling them, because they're paying, to do X. And whatever X is may be counter to what the mission is of this task force, because that individual that wants that basement doesn't want to hear that they have to relocate all of their mechanical equipment, plumbing equipment, or lose the basement altogether. Education, information, and getting the design professional at the stage of design, prior to permitting, prior to inspection, or any other type of enforcement, is where we really need to focus. And that could change a lot of those yellows to green, because getting the design professionals, the developers and the GCs on board with our mission can preempt a lot of this and not have the burden be on the agency. And it's unfortunate that DCRA has to come in and say, no, you can't do that, because they reside in a flood hazard area or floodplain prone area. But design professionals that are meeting with months in advance should be looked at as a source. That just goes with the education and the outreach. That's all that is. So.
That's an excellent point. A lot of these were based on your comments from the last meeting. And we do appreciate that. They're very helpful. 4.1.2, we just jump to that one for now. Again, it talks about how do we require a backwater valve if someone rents out a basement dwelling. And if it's a rental unit, the renter may not know a whole lot about protections from a backwater system. But the code basically should say that if you're below the upstream manhole, you should have a backwater valve. It's just good protection. What kind of coalition would we need for that one or the next one or the next one below that to be?
So I can actually discuss that.
Sure.
So I'm a member of the CCCB. I brought this up before, where any changes to regulations in the district for DCMR 12, which is the district municipal regulations, has to go through that body. That body is appointed by the mayor. I happen to be a board member of that, and they do have technical advisory groups that are available for any and all, for the public, for the government to sit in and address some of these concerns. But that, unfortunately, for now, I can only speak for DCMR 12. I do not know if there's a similar body for DCMR 20, which is the DOEE regulations. But that could be, that could be confirmed or looked up. But for any type of code change, it will have to go through that body. Now, be very mindful. A code change is different from a process and policy. The director of DCRA is the code official. He then appoints a chief building official that takes on the responsibility of enforcing the code. But we do have administrative authority to interpret as well as identify policies and practices that would benefit the district. So that there's some gray area there. And if we could discuss exactly which backwater valve kind of portion in the plumbing codes that would sort of be in line with what's already in the code, but be a betterment for the city, that's how we need to work in that direction in order so that we don't have to go through a very lengthy process of trying to modify the building code / plumbing codes.
Thank you. Very helpful. And I think we've had this discussion before, like 4.1.4. When it ties back to the insurance, would there be a subsidy from an insurance rate perspective for sewer backup insurance if you had a backwater valve? It's a discussion item, because that could then entice people to put one in.
Yeah, I would expand it. I mean, not just backwater valve, but if they've done other flood proofing.
There you go.
Yeah.
We jumped category 3 for the Monty. Do we have time to cover that?
I just typed in the chat. We have about 2 minutes remaining, but we can always shave a little bit off the end if you want to round 5.
Nick, you
So,
can
yeah.
just to cover. Category.
Yeah, so I'm just hearing this conversation, and all of these are at some point dependent on funding, right? If we're going to repair homes, we need funding. If we're going to floodproof homes, we need funding. Because the whole idea is that we're trying to make the floodproofing and the repair and the insurance easier. And I wonder if we can knock out all of these. We can provide that funding source with some kind of like global parametric policy that pays the district. And then the district is just there saying like, okay, who needs a backwater valve? You need one, here's some money. Who needs floodproofing? Who needs repair? Like, I don't know, I'm oversimplifying it, but maybe they're so interconnected. And just to spend a second on what category 3 is. So category 2 is like your house has flooded, you have water damage in it. You need someone in there quick to dry it out, cut out the drywall. Category 3, that's before the flood, your home is at risk. Can we elevate your utilities? Can we do some other flood proofing around your house so that the next time it does flood, either you're protected at a building scale. So yeah, I think we just leave it. We can leave it at that. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on the effort and benefit value.
Yeah, this is a big. So there is some connection. I think there's some of the items that are under the insurance section that were very much related to the Flood Smart Home retrofits. So, you're absolutely right, Nick. There is a heavy dependency between all of these items. And I think as we're going through how we're actually going to accomplish these things and creating the action plans, we can kind of group those right things together and then reference the other parts. So.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Nick. Monty, you want to take us?
Great. So we'll transition to, thank you for the conversation, everyone. It sounds like there's a lot of notes and areas that we need to make some adjustments. It sounds like for Misia, you're going to give your feedback and some notes post-meeting, which we highly appreciate. And Jed, thank you so much for your contribution to the conversation. That was really enlightening to hear kind of the process and your thought of what it would take to have these type of, there's no example of it right now because there is none, and what the possibility looks like. So thank you for that. Chris, you sound very engaged with the community that we were having kind of some question marks on. So I think that having your voice amplified in that space especially in section 4, category 4, excuse me, would be very helpful. So your outtake notes on that would be valuable. And then Sel, generally, you've brought up a great point, which is that flood risk versus flood damage. And we really appreciate that kind of back to point 1 or square 1 and thinking to kind of overlay everything that we're doing and distinguishing the two. We have some of that distinguishment here, but I think that it takes a further refinement that will help make this plan speak to the concerns of this action team. So this has been great. We're going to transition over to closing out our meeting. So if with that, Meredith, could you come online to talk about what we're looking forward to doing with our January 19th full task force meeting? Thank you.
Yes. Next slide. Yeah. So what we want to do for the action team meeting, flood task force meeting next week is take what we've talked about today and these the overview of all the categories and action ideas and present that to the task force. So as we were talking, I think I'm going to combine a little bit of the homework here. I think what would be a great idea is if the category leads work with the members of their action category to modify the chart that we've created to get it to a point where everyone's content with it, in terms of taking it to the next step. And so we will present that to the task force, give the opportunity to get feedback from the task force. We have many of the agency directors there to give us that feedback. So that's what we want to do. And also related to the public listening sessions, we want to get to having the evaluation of all these actions, getting to the matrix that Salil presented at the beginning, the effort value matrix, so that when we go to the public, we can share with them, what we're thinking about, the ideas we have, and kind of where they fall on that spectrum of effort to value. Another item that we want to bring up at the task force meeting is if anybody in any agency is working on something right now, say a grant application or a budget enhancement request, and you need task force support to back that up, we want to take the opportunity when the task force is meeting to gain that support. So let us know if you do have anything that's out there. I know from DOE we have a budget enhancement request for Flood Smart Homes proposal to fund an initial set of work, well, actually multiple years of work to implement Flood Smart Homes. I think I'll turn it over now to Opera, who will talk about the public listening sessions.
Good afternoon, everyone. This has been a great discussion. And quickly, we just want to review, and for the edification, as you guys, or as we all continue to kind of talk through and walk through kind of the outcomes of what we want to come from this task force, there is a human and community component that is also leading this effort that I believe actually Meredith spoke to quite eloquently when talking about how we are thinking about our outcomes and the effort. of any of results and the actions that we propose. And so in a parallel discussion of what we're actually doing with the task force, we also need to be hearing from and talking with the community. I think that there were excellent questions that were brought up in the beginning in regards to overlaying, for example, what happened on September 10th or the September 10th flood event with some of these proposed actions. And so maybe that's some considerations also that we can take as we reach out and have community conversations in regards to, one, what the public actually needs and is understanding as it relates to all flood risk, and flood concerns here in the district. So the thought is that we want to host at least 3 public outreach listening sessions, all before, I believe, the mid-March. And they will be hosted at different times of the day to hopefully encourage as the most participation as possible. So there'll be a morning and afternoon and evening sessions. And we are also hoping to gather intel from all representative quadrants of the city as well. And really the main focus is to initially go through this exercise with the community that we're doing now, as far as kind of outlining some actions that we think as a task force would be of the advantage for this task force to come up with, but that is only advantageous as what the community needs and the resources that they need to be resilient and sustainable in this climate and flood conversation. So more to come on that. We would definitely appreciate any insights into the public listening sessions. Also, your attendance, once we have the confirmed dates, would be welcomed as well. We will also, I think I should add the caveat that most of these, actually all of these right now, our current posture is to have these virtually. But hopefully that also will encourage the participation of the community as well. And I believe that's it for this slide.
Great. So Meredith, it sounds like you already gave the homework unless you have a little bit more to add to that.
Yeah, let's show the slide to make sure. I probably missed something here. Yeah, so in regards to the action plan ideas, we want to make sure we've captured any ideas that should be added. And also, we're going to add on to this, as I mentioned, that we want all the action category leads to coordinate to come up with the final version of the evaluation color ratings. We will modify that last section that we had a lot of discussion about, the community value, to help try to give that a better definition, to really show how that would be valued before we do that. But in terms of dates, we've written on here January 28th. What we actually want to do is before the next task force meeting, which is a week from tomorrow, that's when we want to have all that category, the action evaluations done. This is for additional information to add on top of that. So if there's ideas, we can add those now. If you want to add them now, get them in front of the task force by next week, add them in now. Otherwise, they can always be added in later. We also want to make sure we've got any relevant reports in our agency efforts. We sent out a collaboration document before, well, actually right after the new year last week, with a link to add information to that. And as we move towards the next action team meetings, we want to start identifying what agencies will be the leads on these actions. So let's plan to come to the next action team meeting with an idea of who's going to be the leads. And we will start delegating, and hopefully lots of volunteering will happen, and it will just all work out. And if you want to do participation in an action category that you're not currently on the list for, talk to the category lead to get added to that. So I think that covers it all.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you to the DC Water and DOEE team. This has been great. The time and effort that's put into taking on the task force work and presenting it to the action teams is quite a bit. So I guess it's a labor of love, though. Everybody's really into it, and we're happy to be collaborating with each other. But please, as action team members, we again encourage you to participate offline. You have quite a bit of homework. Nothing's it's too heavy, but it should be something that should come fairly natural because it's the cadence of what you're doing on a daily basis. So hopefully you all will be able to convene offline. Again, Salil and Opera from DC Water are your points of contact for this flood task force, as well as Meredith and Nick. If you have any questions, they're available. And with that, I'd like to say there are a few meetings coming up. We have our governance and coordination action team meeting on January 14th, which is a few days from now, and that's at 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Again, there'll be a WebEx link that will go out. Our full task force meeting will be on January 19th from 2 to 4 p.m. Another WebEx meeting. We will be reporting out from our action team activity from this month at that particular meeting, as we've discussed. And then the next residential resilience action team meeting is in February, on February 8th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Hello.
Great. Well done. Thank you.
Hello, who's calling? Hello?